Hello, and welcome to the first OWLS podcast. What follows is the recording from our April 3rd, 2025 panel entitled Connect to Master Conflict, Developing Leadership Skills to Overcome Workplace Challenges. Speakers on this panel were Megan Allison, Robin Fortner, Michelle Mehta, Jessica Ruttenber, Eleanor Vono, and myself, Elisabeth Ald, as moderator. We hope you enjoy the recording that follows. Find details about this panel, future panels, and all things OWLS at militaryowls.org. Enjoy.
Hello and welcome. I am Susan Feeland, the founder and president of Academy Women. Academy Women is a 501c3 nonprofit organization launched in 2003 to bring together our community of American military and veteran women leaders from all services and commissioning sources. Our goal is to work together for mentoring, training, and growth opportunities, because together we can achieve our highest potential and work-life balance by sharing research, insights, and lessons learned to help tackle the unique challenges we face as service leaders. If you're considering a career transition or know somebody who is, be sure to explore our career transition tab on our website, militaryowls.org. We are especially proud to offer you free access to our virtual engagement center, which is a 24/7, always-on platform where members of the military community can gain access to important resources, register for upcoming events, and connect through asynchronous texts, audio, and video chats with top-tier military-friendly organizations. Also, for those in career transition, we offer monthly webinars, and soon we'll announce the new date for our 2025 Career Coaching Workshop, which is an entire day of workshops and discussions led by career coaches, industry experts, and top caliber military-friendly organizations. This event also offers opportunities to connect in person with hiring managers interested in meeting and employing military women leaders. In the poll at the end of this session, we want to hear not only what you thought of the session, but also let us know if you'd be interested in attending that event. Now for our Officer Women Leadership Symposium, OWLS. This is such a wonderful program. Thank you all for joining us for the first of 8 events in the 2025 OWLS virtual series. To ensure the OWLS 2025 experience is as accessible as possible, we've transitioned to a virtual format. Today's discussion will be the first of 8 monthly events. The Officer Women Leadership Symposium, OWLS virtual series, convenes experts, thought leaders, and innovators with members of the military, government, and veteran community to explore emerging trends, strengthen skills, and transform observations into actionable insights to lead positive change. For those who would like to revisit the insights and recommendations shared today, we are recording today's event, and we'll make the video recording and a podcast version available on our website at militaryowls.org. You will meet our panel of experts and thought leaders shortly, but first I would like to introduce Elisabeth Ald, who will be your moderator today. Elisabeth is an Air Force veteran, an industry leader, and the chair of the Officer Women Leadership Symposium. A very special thank you goes out to Elisabeth and our Academy Women Board of Directors, who volunteer countless hours to produce this programming designed to inspire and empower our community of military and veteran women leaders as we navigate career challenges and work toward our personal and professional goals. We have a real treat planned for you today, so let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Elisabeth Ald to the virtual stage. Enjoy the discussion, everyone. Elisabeth, over to you.
Thank you very much, Susan. Today we are going to talk about conflict. Conflict is a natural part of any team dynamic, but how you handle it as a leader makes all the difference for yourself and for those you are leading. Our experts are here today to discuss tools to navigate conflict and difficult work environments. All of our speakers are participating today on their own behalf and not as representatives of any particular organization. Our intent today is not to focus specifically on today's work environment, but on taking a much broader view and what tools and tricks have endured through the ups and downs of their own careers to help them through difficult situations. I'm incredibly excited about this fantastic group of speakers. I do want to let you all know we'll leave time at the end for any questions, so please use the Q&A. I have the briefest of introductions for each of our speakers, one small sentence that can't possibly encapsulate all the awesomeness that they're bringing here today, but I'm giving it my best shot here. First, I'd like to introduce Megan Allison. She's the director of Air University Leadership and Innovation Institute. She's an Air Force veteran and is passionate about developing leaders, strengthening organizations, and driving long-term success. Next, I'd like to introduce Robin Fortner. She's a Marine veteran who founded RC Fortner Enterprises, whose mission is to assist individuals or businesses to reach their highest goals through coaching, training, and personal and professional development. Next, I'd like to introduce Michelle Mehta, PhD, an experienced consultant, coach, and researcher specializing in the dynamics of organizations and working life. As a former Air Force spouse, she is a dedicated advocate for military spouse employment. Jessica Ruttenber, aka J. Rutt. She's an Air Force veteran and is the director of Level Up Aviation, a nonprofit that she founded dedicated to helping youth and young adults find equity in aviation, combining her passion of flying with her commitment to breaking barriers in the field. And last but not least, Eleanor Vono. She is the attorney advisor for the Defense Legal Services Agency, who began her career as an Army JAG and is a founding member and past president of the Military Spouse JD Network, who has advocated for licensing accommodations for military spouses in a variety of professional backgrounds. All right, welcome, panelists. Let's just dive in with a question, and I'll start with Megan. So when presented with conflict within the team you are leading, how do you leverage emotional intelligence?
Well, I'd like to think that we are leveraging emotional intelligence all the time. That doesn't seem to always be the case. If that's the issue, I would say we need to do a relationship needs assessment, right? Everyone in a relationship, you have needs, I have needs, and then what do we need to do to keep the relationship working and productive and not in conflict? That's the first thing. Hey, what do you need? What do I need? And why are we not like seeing eye to eye on this? But then the second is that social awareness piece of emotional intelligence, where your perspective is not the only perspective that there is. And just the way that you would handle things is not necessarily the only way there is to handle things. And so it's that awareness of, hey, maybe if I tried to use some empathy here and consider somebody else's perspective or point of view, I would be able to come to a resolution to this conflict, because not all conflict is bad. I would definitely highlight that. We need that constructive conflict. It's good to have diverse schools of thought where we're getting different ideas. We don't want a lot of groupthink going on all the time. So it's handling that conflict in a positive way, that we're all trying to get to the same goal, the same outcome, and a positive one at that. So I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. That was a great answer. Robin, moving on to you. Often to resolve conflict, we need to manage the issue down, sideways, and up. And which do you think is important to tackle first?
Hi, Elizabeth. Yeah, great question. When I think of up, down, and sideways, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if there's a first, right? I think we have to really hone our skills to keep enough tools in the toolbox to really look at the situation. Unfortunately, but fortunately, to Megan's point, not all conflict is bad. I think I found myself in every situation, right? So when I think of down, I think of as a leader, I may think of that conflict being someone subordinate to me, right? Someone junior, maybe the conflicts with me actually, or maybe the conflicts with their own peers. Then when I think of sideways, I think of peers. And I'm going to be honest, I remember growing up in the Marine Corps, and one thing we used to always say, the hardest people to lead is your peers. And even as an adult, I'll tell you, just recently, peer conflict is probably the most recent one that I had to tackle within the last year. That one may become a little bit more prevalent than the others. Then when you think of up, that one's a little tricky. That could potentially be a leader. And how do junior people handle conflict with a leader? That's more of a sensitive way to approach it. So I don't think there's a first. I think it's let's have enough gumption to really look at the problem and drive down to where the friction point is. And I think that's going to tell us which way to go. And then when you think about which way to go, you pull those tools out that's different for each one. I think each sideways, up or down, you got to do something different. It's not going to be the same. As well as when we do conflict, I like to also know who the people are, who's the agitator, who's I'm going to say victim, but I don't want to make anyone a victim, but you get my point. Who's causing it, who's receiving it, and then how would they receive that type of, say, tool to manage the conflict. And I'll use myself as an example because that's the best thing. The most recent one was a peer. But yet to that person, I may have actually been a subordinate to him, but to me, it was a peer for me. So I had to realize that how was I going to address this conflict with the peer that honestly I never had experienced before. I'm coming from the enlisted side. This was honestly from the officer side, but the role I was in was an officer equivalent role. You understand what I'm saying? So here, relationship there. At the same time, he may have looked at it as a subordinate relationship. So really trying to address where the friction points was from a humanistic adult perspective. And that's how we drove down to actually mitigating, I would say, a lot of the conflict areas. But if I would have went at it just in one way, again, I don't think it would have been received as effectively. So to your point, great question. I would love to see us as women, as leaders, to just stop and just say, where's the friction point at? And then really pull out those tools to drive down towards that. Hope that was helpful.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think, too, when you drive down to find the friction point, you might find the situation is different than maybe it was initially presented to you.
Perfect. It could also be from a different perspective. One thing I used to love to do is really know who people are. Like I love, Elisabeth, that you stopped us even on the panel and said, who are we? Introduce yourself. Because that's the first rule to me in leadership. We say, know yourself, but also you need to know your subordinates and employ them to their own capabilities. So really knowing them helps actually knowing how to address any type of problems.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. Michelle, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just want to build on Robin's great answer, and that it really illustrates for me that I think it's important to treat conflict as a piece of data to be curious about, rather than we very often have an emotional response. It goes to Megan's point about how to incorporate emotional intelligence. But instead of being reactive, if we can pause and say, this is interesting. Why did that person roll their eyes at me when we were in that meeting just now? And to actually unpack that and investigate what might be going on before we react or jump to conclusions. Really appreciated Robin's perspective about it depends how you respond if you really need to look at the situation. And I would just add to do so with curiosity and a bit of detachment instead of jumping to conclusions.
That's actually a great segue to my next question, which is for you, Michelle. I think in the military, we have a tendency to keep private difficult situations. We like to try and resolve things before it becomes, before like our bosses know that there's a problem. So when would it be important to seek outside expertise?
I'm not sure if the emphasis on there is on outside or expertise, but let me unpack that because
sure,
my definition of leadership that I did not make up, but that I really believe in the definition of leadership that says leadership is mobilizing people and groups to get work done. It's not a title, it's not a rank, it's a behavior. So anybody can exercise leadership, and sometimes people with authority don't necessarily do it very well. So it really is about getting work done and helping groups and people get to that place and face what's going on in a healthy way. To your point, leadership to me is rarely a private individual act. For any real leadership, at least for a sticky problem, it requires the vulnerability to let other people in. And particularly for what I would call adaptive challenges that are really have to do with relationships and strategies and negotiating change, no one person has the right answers. And I would say Don't trust the leader that tells you they do. And that, I think, is very often a downfall of our ego, particularly in cultures such as the military, that maybe particularly officers have been taught that the key to success is showing that you got it, right? Showing that you are in charge, showing that you are confident. And those are all great qualities, but leadership requires enough confidence and humility to say, whoa, I didn't see this coming. Help me figure this out. And so I would say, really understanding when you're in that situation. If you don't have the answers, if it's not a straightforward do A, then B, and then equal A plus B equals C, if it's not that kind of problem, then I think it's important to step back and say, what do I need to know that I don't currently know? And who might help me figure that out? Who are the right people to help me figure that out? And it could be people on your team. It could be outside mentors. It could be a professional coach like me. So again, when is it outside versus an expert? I would say all leaders need allies in their work. We all need people that we can go to and say, Robin, I know you've been in this kind of situation. Give me a little advice here. Help me talk through this. And going to a professional, a coach like me or other colleagues, I think makes sense when A, you are in a pattern or you feel stuck. I know this is a sticky thing and I just don't know how to proceed. I need someone to help me through this. Or you need a neutral sounding board, or you just know there's something in you that you want to get to the next level and you want some help being a better leader. And you need some honesty about that, somebody that will hold up a mirror and give you that feedback and help you through that. So those are my initial thoughts for that.
Great. Thank you. You guys are doing such a great job at putting in these natural segues between my questions. So thank you very much for that. Because my next question was for Jessica, and it's about building a community. So many times in my career, and even through today, it's my battle buddies that really get me through some sticky situations. And they're such a great tool. What's the best way to get that started, to build your network, to build your battle buddies?
Hi, everyone. The Battle Buddy, I talk frequently on panels and discuss some of the things that the Women's Initiative team in the Air Force has accomplished as a member. Anywhere from our hair regulations, you may relate to that with the bun going down as the two braids or the ponytail or the single braid, to pregnancy discrimination, to these very large policies we were able to influence at the Air Force, DoD. And oftentimes we had to work with Congress to change US laws for the better of women in the service and for our foundational readiness. And when I do these panels and I go over and over again, like trying to reflect how we did it, number one is a battle buddy. Like, you need a group. You cannot go alone. You significantly decrease your likelihood of being successful. You're more likely to burn out. You're more likely to be wrong or interpret a situation without a battle buddy. And this is why. So you start off and you have a problem or a conflict or something that's frustrating that you can't resolve maybe at your unit level or in your organization. And you got to put yourself out there and find like-minded people. And there is a chain of command, and I'm not telling anybody to break the chain of command, but I think we're hardwired that we tell our first line supervisor, and if they don't agree with us, then that's the end. And there's so many more avenues that I didn't even know until I was a lieutenant colonel that I could take my concerns to, like for hair regulations and flying while pregnant or having uniforms that fit. Because in the end, my chain of command didn't have the authority to say no. And there was wonderful groups that I could join to speak at, which put that down right now, guys. It's the Defense Advisory Committee on Women in the Service, is a committee that's been around for 50 years that was invoked by law that gives recommendations for women's readiness to the Secretary of Defense. Every year they come out with a report, and every quarter when they have this, you can go out there and make a 2 to 3 minute statement. And that's what I did. And it's very intimidating. It's very scary to go alone. And let me tell you how I found my battle buddies, my tribe. I started on a Facebook rant around 2015 and 16. And I think even though we make fun of social media, it can be a good thing because now we're connected and we're not in silos at separate organizations. So you don't have to fly out to a conference to find like-minded people. And I was very frustrated with things that I went through. But then I was in charge of women and they were going through the same thing. And at one point, we had a commander that wouldn't let a woman go to a PME, professional military education, because she was pregnant. And we wanted to fight him, but then we realized he was going to be replaced by somebody else. It just happened to be a he. And we wanted to go much larger. And I didn't know what to do, but I knew I needed to take a first step. And my first step was going on social media in a group that I felt was safe. Not that social media is safe, because you should assume everything's going to be public, but it was a women's officer forum when a lot of women got together and we could share issues that related to female officers. And I know there's a lot of forums out there, but this was a particularly positive one that had great gatekeepers that didn't allow sensationalism and stuff like that. And from there, I started getting connected with the women's initiative team. And I started taking on my own issues. I was frustrated, but these are the people that you need to bring on board, not just people that admire a problem or complain about a problem. Your battle buddies need to be somebody that's one, willing to tell you you're wrong, take the time to listen to you, and help you frame that argument into actionable steps. And then for anything else, if you're going to make some significant change, you're going to be told no a lot. It might be a week, it might be 6 months. Some of the initiatives I worked on took years. And for one thing, you need to be able to scream and say what you're thinking to somebody out loud before you have to put that public polished face on when you're talking to a group. They are going to help your morale, and with your team, they'll help you go longer in the distance when you have to get a setback. Like recently, there's been a few policies that have been rescinded. And now we're regrouping, right? We know we might have to retake on a few arguments that we did before, but we're doing it together and not as an individual. And with a group and a battle buddy, you have a much larger network. I could not get access to the Secretary of the Air Force, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, all these groups of people that at my rank I had no business being in a room with. But people want to help. Senior leaders want to help. And when I would get in a room with them, sometimes I would just write a paper and put it out there with my name on it and my contact information. And that senior leader would get me a meeting with another senior leader because they went to school together. Or maybe that person you went to Airman Leadership School with, or SOS, and I'm using Air Force examples, is now the executive officer or the assistant to the person in the office. You need that large network. And then you need a different perspective. Because one thing I think teams go into, they just assume they have the upper hand on the argument. But there's always a counterpoint to your argument. And you got to keep in perspective, what is the payout for the individual you're trying to influence? Ultimately, as women, we want to help remove barriers from women in service, and as well as all the people that we lead, not just women. But how is that in the best interest of the organization? So you need that battle buddy to red team you, to tell you when you're wrong. Often I'll go into ready to debate an argument with a decision maker, and you have another person across the table that has a different perspective to you. And if you haven't practiced with your team who have different perspectives, maybe they're lawyers, maybe they're turning wrenches in the field, they need to come with your counterpoints, and then you have to be smarter than anybody else in the room. And you can't do that without a team preparing you like you're going to go into a debate. Not that you should go in like ready to argue with someone. You just got to be prepared to give your perspective in a persuasive manner. And you can't do that alone. And I would say that there is usually a leader in these organizations that lead an effort. But again, your battle buddies come along with you. And sometimes you have to tap out. I've had to tap out before, having children, taking a few months off and tap back in. That's my take on battle buddies. And I'd be curious what the rest of you guys think.
Elisabeth, if I can, I just want to add and just amplify the work that WIT has done. So, Jessica, I was a member of DACOITS some years back, and I tell you, WIT and what they've done in the Air Force was an example to follow. It really was. There was a lot of briefs from the WIT team to DACOITS committees. And just so everyone knows out there, many of the meetings for DACOITS is public, right? So if you had the opportunity to do the research, you can actually attend the public version of it and see what some of the changes was. But just want to amplify how strong a community can be. So what you all did, it started a complete I'm not gonna say revolution, but at the same time, it was organized to the point where people didn't feel alone. And other services caught on to what WIT did in the Air Force, and they caught on and created their own communities. And it became communities of strength, right? And didn't have to be during working hours. Social media is a great platform if you use it correctly, right? So just taking that step out there to everything we're talking about today, just understand you can't do it by yourself. Just taking that step out there, do a quick research, and you'll find if it's not a whole community, it could potentially just be one or two. Something we started in the Marine Corps, I think everyone knows we was the last one to desegregate our boot camp, right? 2 years ago, our boot camp down in Paris Island was still segregated per se, and they had a deactivation ceremony. We all attended. And no matter what the policy was, there was still, you could feel the power in everyone just being together, right? So just having that power of the community, so you know you're not on the island all by yourself. One small step can really impact. If you keep going, it really can impact the larger. So to WIT, Dakowitz, again, if everyone's not heard of them, they're small but large in impact. So I just wanted to add how powerful one move of just making that decision and courage to say, I'm going to start a group, it really can be profound.
And I just want to add in, you need a recruit. And this is just a quick, funny story that when I started some of the stuff I was working on, aircraft design, being inclusive of women and not just using men in their development, I found women that were really strong and some men powerful that understood data in a way or had access that I did not have. And I just went on my way to reach out to them consistently until they responded. And like some of my best friends now, I never met in person for the first 2 years. Physically, there was somebody, Lilo, Catherine Armandi, she just retired. She was at F-15 Wizzo in recruiting, and she had a piece of the puzzle I needed. And I emailed her. She didn't call back, email back. She was very busy as a commander at the time. And then I called her, and then eventually we realized we're like-minded in small steps. And now we talk almost every other day about the issues we're facing. But it had to be the courage because there was no one to my left and my right that was as passionate as she was. So I went out, not just because I knew her, but because I recruited her. You might have to recruit your battle buddies.
Excellent. Megan, did you have a comment?
Yes, I was just going to say what Jessica's talking about is amazing. The WIT has done a lot of stuff, and that's really to make large changes within an organization. But you also, I would say, look to your left and right. Look to the people that are serving alongside you. I know in command, I watched the mission support group, squadron commanders all have a lunch together once a week. And I looked at the ops group, I was like, why are we doing that? Because it almost felt a little bit more competitive in a way, coming together with your other peer leaders. I know it's difficult, but having those relationships and building those relationships prior to when you need them, prior to like, hey, I need a favor, absolutely comes in handy. And they're a good sounding board. I was noticing that my commander kept going to my DO for everything, or my group commander was going to my, and I thought, man, why is this happening? And I wrote this email. And I was like, I'm going to send this. And I sent it to one of my friends. And he's like, you absolutely cannot send that. And I was like, oh, okay, good to know. You need to have this conversation in person. And he was right. And so having that conversation in person and getting that feedback beforehand prevented me from maybe a misstep that I wouldn't have been able to recover from. That's to Michelle's point on the outside expertise. It could just be a peer that hey, here's what I'm seeing in this conflict. What's your take on it? And they'll give you another perspective without that emotion that you're having. And in the same sense, when someone comes into your office, all emotional and this is happening, man, your first instinct is to protect who's in your group. So you're picking up the phone ready to, hey, yeah, I'll get after this. But really the first thing you need to do is take a deep breath and get to the other side of the story, because Michelle said there's always another side of the story. And if you go in there with guns blazing, it usually won't end well. So that's all I was going to add.
Great. Thank you so much. So certainly not last, but certainly not least, Eleanor, as a non-lawyer, I feel like the military legal system gets involved when things have really gotten out of hand. But do you think leaders should involve legal sooner or later as a potential conflict is brewing?
That's a great question because obviously I'm here in my personal capacity, not giving legal advice, but I do think that it's always good to talk to your lawyer if you've got one, that just as a sounding board. But I think one thing that I've really appreciated about this conversation is that while the topic sort of leadership and conflict could be a big one, I think everyone on the panel so far has touched on sort of two different kind of categories of conflict, like that internal team conflict, personnel management, relationship management, whether it's with a boss or a peer or a subordinate. But then we're also hearing some really great ideas about how to manage almost national policy level conflict that needs to be addressed either through a Dakowitz experience or through policy change. And so lawyers could have a role in either one of those scenarios. And of course, we all, as women and men, I hope there's some men on this conversation as well, have tremendous experience with conflict in our personal lives. We grew up as children who had conflict probably with our parents. If we're parents, we certainly know that parenting includes conflict. So we have a lot of these skills. And there was one piece of advice that I got really way too late in the parenting journey of mine. I wish I'd learned it when my kids were little, but I learned it when they were going through the college process. It was when someone comes to you with a problem, I launch into fix-it mode. I'm an attorney. I'm always thinking of solutions. And if only I had stopped and said, do you need a hug? Do you want to be heard? Or do you need a solution? I could stop and say, wait a minute. Are you coming to me with this conflict because you need me to help you solve it? Or do you just want to share it? When we're in a sort of a leadership role and someone comes to us and brings us a conflict, unless it's criminal level stuff, you're probably not going to need a lawyer, right? If it's not someone's being harassed or rules are being broken or there's criminal behavior involved, theft on the team or something, the lawyer's probably not going to be really where you need to go right away. That being said, in my past experiences, I've experienced conflict in teams where the IG turned out to be the best resource for our team because we couldn't resolve the conflict within the team and the lawyers couldn't really help us because crimes hadn't been committed, but the conflict fell into that fraud, waste, and abuse or really toxic leadership department. And so in that situation, it turns out it was really wise to go the IG route where there are attorneys involved. So knowing when you need to go all formal legal and when you really just need to be handling this through your networks is probably one of the first steps you got to figure out. And all of the things we've heard today are you got to have conversations first. And really, in my experience, the most powerful part or the most powerful tool in our toolkit are our relationships with others. I joke that my best legal research skill is phone a friend. There's no way any person, whether it's an attorney or not an attorney, can know how to handle every situation. We're not versed in all of these things. And phone a friend is my way of saying, find the person who is an expert in that particular situation and call them first. Get some advice. I never try and work through these things by myself. And maybe that comes down to personality. I know I've done a lot of those sorts of personality tests where you learn how introverts like to sit with facts and internally think through things. That's not my jam. I need to literally verbalize, chew through, get a lot of inputs before I can decide and make a decision. So that's a long-winded way of saying you can always call an attorney, but an attorney isn't necessarily the right person for a lot of the conflict that I think is probably most common in our experience.
Great. Robin, do you have a comment?
I was going to ask Eleanor to repeat that. You said, do you need a hug? Do you need a...
Yeah, it's the greatest thing. It applies to children, parents, spouses, you name it. It says someone comes to you and they're pants on fire and you say, do you want a hug? Do you want to be heard? Or do you want a solution? Because 90% of the time, they're just coming to tell you and you're just supposed to listen. And I learned this with my children where I would say, you need to call the teacher or you need to reach out to your friend and you need to do this. My mom was like, Mom, I just need you to listen. And then she could calm down, go for a run and problem averted. I didn't have to go nuclear, which is where I traditionally would have started if I hadn't learned that advice.
I love that. I think I know that in my head, but I don't always execute that. It's like I don't always say it out loud. And now I hear people say, just listen, don't judge, or something along those lines, right? That's like a big thing now is I just need you to listen, don't judge. And it's like you just got to remind yourself, these are active listening skills that we know, but when you're in the moment, and it really depends on who you're talking to, right? Because so somebody said it earlier, emotion, what's the relationship with that person? Where's your emotional tie-in with it, or what's your buy-in with that person? So great reminders to just slow down a little bit and be who that person needs you to be and be their love language, not so much as be who you know you are, the fixer, the leader, because I'm totally like that. I'm the fixer, I'm the leader. I have the answers. So it's no matter how grown we get, how well we are, how popular we are, how successful we are, we all need to be able to do that. So thank you for sharing that, Eleanor.
And Robin, I think you touched on something that is really helpful in the workplace environment, probably works at home too, but in my professional experience, and if you were to look at my resume, would think I can't keep a job because I pretty much got a new job every 2 to 3 years. Being a military spouse attorney, we moved and I had to start all over. And the thing I learned early on is that if I could always be that trusted agent where I was a good listener, I then became that person on the team who people could come to with problems and situations so that I always had my pulse on the finger of what was going on. And so I think that's a really important skill to develop, whether you're a leader or not. I always made sure that my teammates knew that their problems I was available for, whether it was just to listen or to offer solutions, whatever they needed. And in addition, when it came to a group of peers, and in my work as an attorney, we might all be working on different projects. I always dropped what I was working on, unless it was like something due, and tried to do my colleague or teammates' work first. If they brought me something like, hey, I need you to review something, that became my next priority because I wanted to be that person on the team that they knew they could come to and get help from. Because then if I ever needed help, I had built up that trust that I considered their work just as important as what I was working on. So maybe that's listening, maybe that's supporting. I'm not sure what bucket that falls into, but I do think that is a hugely helpful role to play on a team that then when conflict comes down the pike, hopefully there's enough goodwill that if you have to make some hard decisions and maybe disagree with people, they know that it's for the good of the team and it's not personal.
Absolutely.
I'm just seeing a common thread through all of this, whether it's conflict or building relationships or you're growing your battle buddies. It's really having the courage to operate at the boundary, just like showing up in a transparent, brave, and honest way, and being willing to hear what people have to say.
My next question actually was for you, Michelle. I think often conflict in a team and in an organization stems from when there's change afoot. So can you talk about ways maybe you can prepare for a change in advance so it doesn't become a conflict?
Absolutely. But if I can amend the question, I don't
Absolutely.
think conflict is something to be avoided. In fact, I do definitely believe, again, conflict is data about a problem that needs to be solved. And I think it's really important to be open to conflict arising and actually teach your team that conflict is a normal part of doing business together, or use business generically. And at the same time, preparing for change and whatever upheaval may come, I think it's about building a healthy team that's prepared to get through it when the time comes. The healthier your team is during stable times, the easier it's going to be for you as a group to weather a storm when it comes up, whatever that might be. And you all might be familiar with the change curve that's based on Elisabeth Kubler-Ross's work on grief and death and dying. It basically shows we go through the typical stages when a change comes up. First, it's shock, then it's denial, and then we go into this valley of despair where we get a little bit depressed and unhappy about what's happening before we accept the change and emerge and move on. And so what we know is that the healthier teams are, the less they stay in that valley of despair, and they're more resilient and able to get through it without wallowing in it because they have the tools to work through it together. So the things that I really advocate in terms of making for a healthy team, one is to start with you as a leader, if you're the leader of the team, and recognize your own impact and yourself as a tool, and really making sure you're tuning your instrument to show up as healthy and calm and centered and clear. Because a big part of a leader's role is to be an emotional regulator for your team. So I really like that metaphor that talks about when you really need to give your team a kick in the pants and get moving on something, it's turning up the pressure and knowing when to turn up the temperature to really get things going and motivate them towards action. But it's also knowing when to turn the temperature down and provide a safe space for them to feel safe and feel like there's a boundary. So really practicing that on a regular basis and consciously choosing how you're going to show up in different moments and days and situations so that they can depend on you being that regulator and that container for them. And then I also really believe in the Patrick Lencioni model, the 5 characteristics of a healthy team. It's a great book if you want another leadership book, but the 5 things are trust, where the leadership builds trust by modeling vulnerability, being open and transparent about what you know and what you don't know, about how you actually feel in a situation. Wow, I'm frustrated by this too, but we'll work it out together, whatever it might be. Number 2, healthy conflict. Real issues are put on the table in a transparent way. They're not pushed under the surface, or they're not like avoided until they reach a boiling point. They are dealt with as a normal part of business. Commitments are clear. The title of the book is The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team: Clear Roles with Clear Actions and Responsibilities. Accountability: teams that hold each other accountable when they don't follow through on agreements. And a focus on results, a common mission that everybody understands versus following their own personal agenda. Those are all 5 characteristics that you can build, maintain, and keep working on all the time so that you're ready when the tough times come. Thank you, Megan.
Yeah, so you set him in the positive. He mentions him as in the negative.
I
So
like to
the
say
absence
him
of trust. Yeah,
Yeah, you can think of it either half a glass half full, half empty.
absolutely. I like your way.
Go ahead, Eleanor.
One thing, a tool that I had to learn and use, there are a lot of free webinars. This one was sponsored by the Department of Defense. It was a Franklin Covey one-day course that I actually took because we had terrible conflict on our team at a point years past and just didn't know how to handle that second one. Michelle, you mentioned the healthy conflict. So when there is conflict and it's not healthy, how do you fix that? And I didn't know. And so I did an all-day seminar on having what was called conflict conversations, where I had to learn how to sit down in an office with someone on our team who was causing all sorts of disastrous trauma and conflict. And shockingly, it worked. I had to sit down and say, please talk to me about why you're behaving this way. I truly don't understand. And I had to listen and learn to things that I had to hear about. And it was, but I guess my point is that these weren't natural skills. I had to actually take a class, whether it's in a book. That sounds like a book could be a good thing too. But knowing how to have those conflict conversations is really, there was actually like a 5-step plan that I had written out, and I sat down with this person and it worked. And so I really encourage, again, reaching out to the experts. There are plenty. The thing that I love about this panel is every one of you has this like incredible expertise. And there are people out there who have done this stuff before. You don't have to make it up and figure it out on your own.
I wanted to actually pitch this question to everybody, and that is, can you give us an example of a surprising leadership lesson that you learned maybe from one of the most junior people you've worked with? A lot of times we lionize the most senior leaders of our organizations, but there are times when the youngest and least ranking person might have the world's best idea. If you guys have any examples of that. Jessica?
I was thinking about this a few moments ago, and for those who, so just about anybody here who are going to be in charge of people in the future, or you're in charge of people now, I keep telling people this over and over. Mentorship isn't just someone older or more experienced than you mentoring downwards. Sometimes as someone who is aging, I don't have the pulse of the generation behind me. So I find it very important to be mentored by younger people and people that don't look or think the same way as me. So I don't want to just necessarily find a white cis female in her 20s to mentor me. And I think it's important. And one person that I took something away from, that I actually, our ideology was not the saying whatsoever. But if you're trying to get information about what's happening in your organization and you do these things called skip chain, when you walk around and talk to people, you haven't done the work to build trust. Airman Smith isn't going to tell you what's really going on. Maybe he will or she will, but if you haven't built trust in that organization, and we do have a chain of command, so they're programmed not to tell you, use the chain of command in these situations. So what he did was he went around once a week and played ping pong with the life support treats in the back where they had a ping pong table. And then he would go to the tower and then he would start building this rapport with people. And the time he got to his fourth or fifth walkthrough, people were actually telling him a couple things that were going on that might not have gone up to the top. And not that to say the NCOs and the lieutenants and captains below them, but sometimes you just need to get the health of your organization because you have the experience levels. I would recommend getting mentors that are much younger than you, that don't think and look like you, and then taking the time to invest into your organization more than just lip service or a commander's call. Do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? No? Okay, I'm out of here. So.
I actually did a breakfast. So I did a breakfast with my airmen, and then the next month I'd do a breakfast with my NCOs, and then the next I would do a breakfast with my senior NCOs, and I went with zero agenda. So if we just sat there, and I threatened to do interpretive dance for them at one point. I was like, if you've got nothing for me, but I went with no agenda so that I could get what was on their mind. And actually, probably my most talkative was the youngest cohort, just setting up opportunities where you can have those conversations where their bosses aren't, or their direct supervisors aren't there with them.
I'll jump in for a second. From the enlisted side, we call this the Lance Corporal Underground in the Marine Corps, right? So this is what we call, right? So Lance Corporal Z3, we call it the Lance Corporal Underground. If you really want to know what's going on, you find the Lance Corporal Underground. Now, of course, it's not literal, but you get the point. As a Sergeant Major, I grew up on that side of the enlisted path. That was my job. Find the pulse, right? That was my job. So as much as we communicate with the peers and those who are above us, my job was to drill down, and I loved it. I love drilling down, seeing what's really going on, right? And that's many different facets, ways. Another way, we say the smoke pit. Everything happens in the smoke pit. Everybody's going to know what's going on in the smoke pit. Get up out your seat, go to the smoke pit. But building those relationships, making them feel safe that they can tell you things and then keeping your word, right? Say what you mean, what you say, do what you say. Don't give them any fake promises, anything like that. Tough love, all those things. I have found they want that, right? They're looking for that. And they're not necessarily afraid to talk 9 times out of 10, but getting that opportunity in that environment will absolutely create candid conversations where you can improve as a leader. One small story that worked really well, because this is what I did the entire time, but I was the director for what we call the Staff and SEAL Academy. So that's E5 through E9. They will come through, they will get their professional military education. One time I had E8s in a room. I was doing it was a workshop for about a week. And these E8s, right? So everyone's a leader. Everyone knows their leader, that type thing. So now I created a panel because normally, to your point, we bring in officers or senior people to help them on a path, but we switched it. We brought in E5s, right? And maybe some E6s, but we brought in E5s and not afraid to talk, and I put them on the panel. And then candid conversation, and at first, a little bit of conflict, right? Because EC5s was telling them what they didn't necessarily want to hear per se. But by the end of that session, man, you saw the gel, right? Because someone said it earlier, leadership is not by yourself, it's behavior, but it's leading people. So how do you know you're good if you're not finding out from the people you actually lead? So this proved to be 100% return on investment, getting that raw data from the people that they lead, whether it's directly or indirectly, but it's understanding, it's going to the smoke pit all at once and understanding what's some of the true pain points they're feeling, where some of the senior leaders may think they have it all put together. But no, we need to listen to the younger ones and truly understand what it is they need. What you say, hug, hear, and support. That can be transpired in a lot of different ways. No, I can't come to a group of Marines and just give them all a hug all the time, but Hugging to me is finding that emotional side, right? It doesn't have to be a physical hug. It could be an emotional hug. I find what makes that person ticks and then create that environment for them to share.
Awesome. We have a couple questions from our audience, so anyone can answer. One is, what are your suggestions to help a team get unstuck when engaged in the conflict cycle, aka constantly storming? All right, Michelle, and then we'll go with Eleanor for next.
Yeah, just briefly, if you know those stages of forming, storming, norming, and performing. So if you're seeing constant storming, to me, that says they need help establishing norms. So have a conversation about what are the conflicts about? And then when you understand, if you can get a conversation going about what the disagreement is or the disagreements are, see if you can build some new agreements around a new norm. If the conflict is about, I don't know, make up something stupid. Who cleans out the refrigerator at the end of the week? Or that it's like, how do you, all right, what agreements can we put in place? And maybe put some time boxing around it. Let's try this for a week or for 30 days and then come back and see how it's working. But actually intentionally dive into what's underlying the conflict and see if you can test out with curiosity some potential solutions.
Eleanor?
And I'd follow that up with the tool. The Army developed this back like in the 70s called the After Action Review. And we recently had a team that was stuck in a conflict mode. And I Googled After Action Review, how to do one. And it turns out we were doing them all wrong. And there's a really good, it's in the Harvard Business Review. And if you just Google After Action Review, best policies or techniques, it was written, the Harvard Business Review did like a study of the Army's AR process. And they discovered that it was really pretty much executed poorly. Like the concept behind it's great, but people don't really do it well. And so we tried doing it on our team. And it was very freeing because it was for the first time, an opportunity for the team to talk about what went wrong, not to blame people, but to own the problem and figure out how to fix it as a team in a way that there was no hierarchy, which is, of course, one of the problems in a military organization is people feel like certain people are in charge of making decisions and the people who are to execute don't feel like they had say. So I would recommend that process if done properly. And again, we just followed the template that this Harvard Business Review article suggested, and it was very effective.
Excellent. I think that's great too, because I think sometimes we get very focused on the instructions and the regulations that we operate in. And it's a good idea to look like outside of your organization for some of those solutions. All right, we have one more question from our audience. I think it's a really great one. How do you handle working with someone who cannot accept or understand feedback, even when it's put in the most constructive manner?
I'll attempt. So one word comes to mind, and that's consistency, right? That's the first word. Not necessarily the easiest thing to do, but consistency, right? If you feel, or when you talk about this feedback, I will really be looking at where's that barrier and what's causing the actual barrier and what's the delivery of the feedback, right? How am I delivering this feedback causing this person not to receive it? You've already said in the most constructive manner. Got it. But everyone receives information totally different, right? A constructive for one may not work for the other. And I've had to switch the way I delivered it. And then again, going back to just open communication to understand the why, right? And then not just the first level of why, but maybe digging down deeper into the next level of the whys. What is the issue? Why aren't you receiving this information? What's causing you to have this roadblock? What about me? Because that too, I have also found, who is the feedback coming from? Can also be or can make a huge difference in how the person is receiving it. I have called on allies. Sometimes I watch and see who's a catalyst. Who does this person listen to? We've all had at some point in our career or heard of, I can say one thing and then maybe a person next to me can say the exact same thing, and yet the audience receives it differently. That's what I'm looking for. Who is this person really listening to? Who is that person's mentor or that person looks up to, or that person goes to advice for, those kind of things. And then if you get that advocate as well to jump and understand what it is that you're trying to convey, it may not have to come from you. All you want is the results, right? So that's another avenue to potentially get your point across to that actual person. So consistency though, encourage on your part, because if you know you're right, and it's not time to let up, right? So you have to maintain and 10 toes down, stand strong on what it is that you believe, but then you just consistently keep chiseling that. How do I break through to this person?
Excellent. Jessica, you had an input?
I did. I'll make it brief since we're towards the end, because I just wanted to add on to that. It just made me reflect upon, I used to be an instructor pilot that taught instructor pilot students how to be instructors. And I saw this pretty often. I know we're talking about emotional IQ and maybe something in an office or personality conflict, but I think it's important to reflect on how the person receives information, like kind of Robin was talking about. And a good example would be when we used to fly Final Approach to Land. If I had a very difficult co-pilot and I could not communicate well with this co-pilot, there was a way we did this technique that it was 95% of the people were using it. But occasionally we get 1 or 2% of people that did it a different way because the brain worked a different way. But the instructors didn't have the skill set to communicate with the student because they had been over exercising the other technique so much. So that was the hardest thing to teach teachers, was you might not be teaching to the way they learn or understand. And you have to be able to check your ego that maybe this information needs to come from somebody else if you can't learn the technique to get to them. So I just want to offer that. It just made me think about my flying days, that we're often like a little stubborn, our egos aside, thinking it's got to be them instead of me. But it's probably both.
Excellent. We are at the end of our hour, and I was sure that it would fly by because it's just been such a really great conversation. But we're going to end with a question that's my favorite to ask people, and we'll go in reverse alphabetical order. And that is, what book, podcast, website, or TV show is saving your life right now? So we'll start with Eleanor.
It is Somebody Somewhere on HBO Max. I think I'm in season 2 or 3.
Oh, that's a great show. Excellent. All right, Jessica?
Ted Lasso on Apple TV. I watched it a couple of years ago. And since things are sometimes has a negative picture, this person helps you, inspire you to keep on being a good, positive leader, even when it seems like impossible odds.
Mm-hmm. Fabulous. Michelle?
I am loving a podcast with Julia Louis-Dreyfus, the Seinfeld Elaine, Wiser Than Me. And she interviews older women about what they've learned from life. And it's amazing.
Another one. We're 3 for 3 on One's Eye Second for sure. All right, Robin?
Okay, I don't think I'm going to add to that thing, Elisabeth, because I don't watch TV much. I have to say that. What's blasting in this house right now is honestly Russell Brunson. I'm in a rebuild stage, so I'm learning more about what funnels are and social media and internet, and so that to me is saving me right now because it's getting me out of my own space.
Excellent. And then Megan.
Okay, so I don't read a lot of books on leadership because that's what I do all day. I am watching Black Hawk Down, the documentary on Netflix, which is excellent. I'm reading The Song of Solomon by Toni Morrison. And then when I drive, I listen to a book, and I'm listening to Britt Marie Was Here, fiction by Bachman is one of my favorite authors.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies, for your time and your efforts on our behalf. And it just does my heart good that we are able to pivot in a way that continues our community this year. And Susan, I think, is going to put up some slides for some of our future events. So our next OWLS webinar is going to be next month on the 6th of May. And we're going to be hearing from Robin Phoenix Johnson. She is an Army veteran and comedian who's going to talk to us about using humor to elevate your mindset and improve your problem solving skills. And you are all invited. It is going to be free, just like today's was. You can use the QR code to register, but also it'll be on all the socials and emails and that kind of thing that you can join us next month. All right. Also, we have something called the Virtual Engagement Center. It is on 24/7, 365, and it has a lot of our material, both like from today, but also a lot of our career transition support items. So it's a great place to check and get the latest and greatest from us. And then lastly, here is our schedule of events for OWLS and our career workshop events. We are committed to doing something once a month for OWLS. It's either going to be an event like this, or we're just going to have a virtual meetup so that we can just connect and network. On the career workshop side, we have a couple webinars coming up, and we are going to try and do an in-person career coaching workshop in the fall. Date to be announced, think November-ish, and that'll be hosted at George Mason University in Arlington. Once again, I cannot thank you all enough. Jessica, Eleanor, Robin, Michelle, and Megan, thank you so much for being here today. And this was just so enjoyable, so great to be together with you all. So thank you.